Welcome to the WorkJoy Jam podcast. I'm your host, Beth Stallwood, founder of Create WorkJoy. In this episode, I am joined by the fabulous Cheyne. Ryan works in and has for many years in a leader in the HR world. And so many people who listen to this podcast come from that world. And I thought it'd be really interesting to get somebody who's been leading in this area and to consider some of their ideas and suggestions and advice around how to build WorkJoy in to an organisation. And we come at it from different perspectives, and Ryan tells the story about developing some values which were key at an organisation he worked with. So here's one for the HR people, but also it's not just for HR people. It's for people who want to lead, who want to engage, who want to do people stuff really well. And that isn't just about the people who officially work in HR. That is about people doing people stuff great. And that could be you're a leader, it could be you're in the organisation, it could be you're doing anything. So some great advice here. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to the WorkJoy Jam podcast. Today, I'm so excited to be joined by the fantastic Cheyne. And Ryan is an amazing HR leader, people director, cultural, brilliant, cool person. And I'm really excited for him to be here with me today. So rather than me introduce him properly, I'm going to ask Ryan to say hello to everyone. And can you give us a little bit of your story, who you are and what you do?
Yeah, wow. Thanks for that intro, Beth. That was really cool. I'm not sure you've got the right Ryan, but hey, I'm here anyway.
I definitely have.
I've been in HR for far too many years. Built a career starting in retail, and for the last 10, 15 years, I was the HR director at Pets at Home, hopefully a brand that many people will recognise. I was there for 10 years, and we did some good stuff, building a great culture, and were named as the Sunday Times Best Place to Work a few years back now, to be fair. But the guys have carried on doing a tremendous job there, well worth looking and seeing what they're doing from a people perspective. And then more recently, I was with a business called rentalcars.com, which merged and integrated with booking.com, the hotel platform. And basically, based in Manchester, we did everything on booking.com that isn't a hotel. So if you're ever on there and you get offered something like a car hire, a taxi, or attractions, that's basically what we did. And had a great few years there, building the team again, and doing the integration with booking. I'm currently a man of leisure, which is really good for the last 3 weeks. And fortunately, the weather has turned very spring and summer like, so I'm enjoying being a man of leisure. Spending my time relaxing, trying to chill out after all these years where I've been working, and then of course keeping my eye out on new exciting opportunities. So yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm very fortunate to have become a man of leisure just as they started to unlock the lockdown.
Yeah.
So I think my second week of unemployment coincided with pubs opening outside. So it's not all bad.
It was like it was meant to be at that moment in time.
It was
for
meant
you.
to be. The pubs opened and the weather turned good. I mean, it's almost like I planned it, right?
Yeah, totally. I love it. And it's so interesting you talk about some of the brands that obviously you work with there. And being a dog owner, a dog person, the Pets at Home brand is definitely one that lands with me. And obviously rental cars and booking.com, so many people will be using that, although maybe not so many in the last year, with booking hotels and travel and things like that. But hopefully more and more opportunity to get out there. And what I'm really excited about today is to talk about the perspective of WorkJoy from this idea of how do we create cultures that enable people to have joy in their work and enable people to be working with their strengths, and are places where people really want to go to work and want to do a great job. and also how that links then into having great business performance. So it's not just about creating lovely, happy places for the sake of it, although that would be good anyway,
Yeah.
but how it really relates to how businesses work really well. And I know that you've worked so many years, so really hard to make those places happen. And it obviously, it doesn't just happen by what you do, it happens by a lot of things. But from that perspective of, I know a lot of our listeners come from the world of HR or learning and development, organizational development, that kind of thing. I think they'd be really fascinated to hear from you about some of the things that you have done. So before we jump into that, a kind of question I'd really like to ask you is around the subject of work joy. So I describe it as, it can be those little moments of things that bring you joy in your work. It can be feeling really great about what you're doing. It can be about using your strengths, and it's sort of different for everybody. And then I cut the question of, okay, so if it's different for everyone, from an organizational perspective, how does that work, and how do we help people to be able to get that? And I've realized I've just answered a massive, massive, massive big question. So maybe just your perspective on, yeah, no, there's like, give me the answer here, Ryan, please now.
Yeah.
But I'd love to know about you and just your perspective on organizations from a bigger picture, and how you start to approach that, what cultural question.
Okay, I'll have a go, Beth. I'll see.
Have a go. We'll
Have a
get
go.
into it.
Have a go. I mean, I think the first thing, I really love the work joy concept that you've come up with, because I think it captures very neatly something that we should really be focused on. And I think the first stage in achieving work joy as an organisation is to recognise that actually it's an important thing to have. Because if you don't
Yeah.
recognise that, you're not going to have it, right? I mean, I think
Yeah.
hopefully most businesses have moved on now from kind of like command and control, and the workers are there to do the anything at the behest of the management, and that kind of
Yeah.
Dickensian type approach. But I suspect there are still firms out there that have that to a certain degree. But for me, um, I think if the company recognises that it will perform better if its employees are happy and want to be there and feel trusted enough and have the confidence that they can do their best work. Um, if companies recognise that, then that's the starting point, because then you can
Yeah.
find out what work joy means for the particular population that you're working with, because it will be very different for, I don't know, a firm of lawyers versus a building company, for example. You know, the concepts there, but what it means for different populations, I'm sure will vary. Um,
Yeah.
and I think it is so important, because we spend so much time of our lives in work. It just makes sense to me that it should be as enjoyable and pleasurable and fulfilling as it possibly could be, whatever that role is. And that's always been kind of at the heart of my thinking and my approach. And one thing you said there about it being about commercial success. Anybody that's worked with me at Pets or at rental cars booking, I have this slide that I trawl out kind of fairly frequently. Um, the Harvard Business School call it the service profit chain, whereby if you get it right for your colleagues, they'll get it right for your customers, and that will lead to commercial success. Yeah. The Harvard Business School call
Yeah.
it the service profit chain. I call it common sense. I mean,
Yeah.
it just works. I know Richard Branson has sort of espoused this sort of approach, but it's always just made sense to me. You know,
Yeah.
if we get it right, our colleagues will do a better job, whatever industry, whatever sector, for their customers, and therefore the business will be more successful. And I think pets and rental cars booking are good examples of where that's happened.
Yeah. I just going to pick up on a few things. I was making some notes as you talked about that. And you're so right. A lot of this stuff is just common sense. It's not crazy. You don't need a label called the service profit chain to realize that if people are enjoying their work, if they want to be there, that they will likely do a better job and be more committed and, want to do good things. I'm really interested in this point about the first thing is to recognize it. And I'm thinking about recognizing it and having the people who are leading the business, if it's like an owned business or if it's, even if it's shareholder led or if it's a small business, big business, it takes some people to sit there and go, actually, we think this is important.
Yeah.
That recognizing a bit is, and that's the first thing of solving any problem or creating something that's good, isn't it? Is knowing what it is you actually want to do. I love that. And then that whole thing about putting it into the context of where you're working. And you're right, every organization will have a different potential style, different types of people who are working there. And it's understanding the context within which you're working and the people you are working with. And that it's not all about necessarily a one size fits all thing. There will be different things that work in different types of organizations. I'm really
And
interested in picking on that.
and even across the organization, right?
Mm,
Even within the same business. So if I think about my most recent experience, we had 2,000 people in Manchester. Half of those were working in a call center,
yeah,
helping address our customers' problems, basically when challenges cropped up. And then a large proportion were software engineers and product people. And those
yeah,
jobs are so kind of different in terms of their core skills and everything that's required. Um, but you kind of have to find a way of having a consistent approach across the business. So again, this is something that we care about and we want to become a great place to work. But then even within that organization, find things that are right for those different populations. Um, and it 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 can go kind of like you can have two or three versions of it across the same business depending on what you're doing.
yeah. So the desire is the same, is that you want people to, but you want to be a great place to work, but the actual things that you do to make that happen will need to vary depending on the types of people you're working with, and even down to really, and this is what I think some people find really challenging, even down to an individual level. So not
Yeah,
everyone who works in that product or tech or engineering world will think exactly the same or get the same amount of joy there. Not everyone who works in the customer service world will think exactly the same. Now there might be some style stuff that kind of works for the whole group, and then it's more about, as an individual, as a line manager, or as someone who's supervising people, how do you help do that and help create that environment for the individual needs as well? And that's where I think it does get a bit complicated, doesn't it? Because you've got, if you have, say, 2,000 people like you did in your last job, and there's 2,000 different ways of doing things, it's not always going to work that way either. So and that is challenging. That is part of what makes it interesting, but also you can't, you won't be able to do everything for
yeah. I
everybody.
mean that I guess that would be some sort of unrealistic panacea in terms of employee
Yeah.
engagement, right? Where everybody was completely tailored to their own personal wants, but
Yeah.
wants and needs. But I think you can find enough commonality. I mean, we are essentially all, we're human beings, and yes, there are variations, but we kind of are all looking for that kind of same um, hierarchy of needs to dip
Yeah.
into the HR textbook. Um, but I think that's where managers play an important role, right? So you'll set up clearly, you're not going to have individual reward policies per se, but you set up a framework, you set up the core, and then managers. That's the population that really need to get into the individual
Yeah.
elements to kind of say, right, what drives this person on, what motivates them, what are their emotional needs, rather than maybe a framework or a structure, or because you're not going to have 2,000 different performance management
No.
um, systems, but I think if you can create the framework and the environment where people are encouraged and supported in doing their best work, then then have that flexibility with managers and making sure that managers just sit down and talk to their people and listen and react to it. Then I think you're in a pretty good place.
Yeah. I I've always said that there is no such thing as like 100% work joy all the time for everybody. It's just not realistic. We don't in our lives feel joy all the time. And actually, if you don't have those kind of down moments or the kind of just neutral ones, sometimes you don't feel the joy as much as you would do anyway. So there are ups and downs and peaks and troughs with all of these things.
Yeah,
And you're so
life,
right about the
right.
importance of managers. Sorry, say that again.
Life's life.
Yeah, life
It-
is life.
Stuff,
And
stuff
also
goes
I've
on.
got a big a big belief that organizations aren't solely responsible for this stuff. So the organization can do what it can do, and it's great where you have organizations that do think about this and do want it to happen, but there is also a responsibility on the individual,
Yeah,
personal responsibility to know what is good for them, to be able to share and give feedback on what they need, to understand what their motivations are, and to take some decisions that help them to work in a world that makes that happen. And I so often think we either think it's the individual's responsibility or the organization's responsibility, and I think it's a real shared responsibility to create an organization that works, because the people within the organization create the culture as well.
yeah.
It's not just, when you set a policy or when the leader says we're going to do this. It's about the people within it making it happen too.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think it's in any organisation, and I'm sure we've all come across people like this, and it's certainly not, this throughout my career, pre pets at home and rental cars. Um, there's always people who seem very work joy less,
Yeah.
and and they sit there and moan and complain and suck the energy out of other people. And it's always struck me, go, ultimately as individuals, we've all got the choice of what we do. And I appreciate that, people need jobs and need to earn money, but if the work joy is that less, why people sit there and don't do something about it? I've always found tricky. But then again, that comes down to managers and having conversations, decent conversations, and saying, why are you not happy? What can we do? And ultimately, if you end up in a dead end where there's nothing else, then people have to make that ultimate choice. Either way,
Yeah.
the organisation or the individuals.
Yeah. I call them the mood hoovers, the ones
Yeah,
that kind of suck the life out of the room, and who you get the sense very quickly that they don't want to be there because so many things appear to be wrong, yet are still there and bringing it down for everyone else. But I don't know about you, Ryan, but I've also in organizations seen the opposite of the mood hoovers, the people who, they're not always in senior positions or kind of in leadership positions or managers, but people who bring joy and kind of really have that ability to spread it as well.
yeah, yeah. No, completely agree. In my early days at rental cars, we were doing some work around the values, and
Mm,
we were defining the values, and trying to articulate what it was like to be part of this already successful, fast growing business. And we did these awards where people nominated their colleagues. It was an entire kind of peer to peer nomination thing. And we did the rental cars personified awards, and every business will have people like this. These are the people that if you cut them in half would have the brand logo running through them like a stick of rock, who
yeah.
represent everything that is positive about the business. And it was fantastic because you just get those people that said, right, if I could fill the business with 2,000 of these people, we'd be sorted.
Yeah.
Absolutely sorted. Again, life doesn't work like that, but it's great, and every business will have those people who who just represent what's important to that company.
Yeah, I love that. And it's I do a lot of work in the world of values and behaviors and what does that look like, and being able to see the people who really show those, who demonstrate them, who are the almost the role models for everyone else is a really, really great thing to have. So what I'd love to do now, if it's okay for you, is to kind of talk about some things like that. So thinking about your values, or thinking about some of the things that you have done or led or seen happen in your career that has helped to create organizations with those amazing kind of award-winning cultures? I'd just love to know, even just like one or two things that you think have made a real difference.
Yeah. Right. Let me think. Well, if I take that rental cars exercise as a starting point, because it was pretty stand out really, um, and it was a team effort. I'm not saying that because it's me. It was just one of the things that we needed to do. We needed to define the values and articulate them. And I remember I just joined the business. I knew this was going to be job number one because I was
Yeah.
through the interview process. My boss, the CEO, had said this is what we need to do when you get here. So I'd given it some pre-thought. And of course, when you go out and do this type of work, as you'll know, you do a lot of focus groups, maybe surveys, interviews. You gather a lot of data about what is it like to work at wherever the business is. And I had my team together, and we were talking about this. And I'll never forget this. It was one of those dull moments. So we were sat round, about five of us in a room, talking about how we were going to do the values. And one of my team, Brian, he said, Ryan, this is all very well, but isn't it all a bit ordinary? I was like, oh, okay. Thanks, Brian. Actually, it was one of the best things that anybody's said, because they had this, although they hadn't had articulated values as such, they had this phrase. It was hashtag anything but ordinary. So that was being thrown in my face in terms of this is a bit ordinary. So we kind of reset and said, right, okay, how can we do something that's a bit special? And one of those weird moments, I think I was in the car on the way home listening to the radio, and they were talking about the upcoming V Festival. And I thought, that's it. We'll have our own V for Values festival.
Yeah.
And we we set about doing this. I was only about 8 weeks into the role. I lasted 6 years, so I think it worked. But I was a bit nervous.
Yeah.
My first full presentation to the board was about running essentially a music festival in the office to try and get our values. And what we did, we held a festival over the course of a week, and we had live music in the office every lunchtime. The place was adorned with bunting and tents and stuff. But every day there was a main stage event, which was some activity which was designed to give us the values information that you would normally get through a focus group or feedback or those kind of things. And it basically was the same stuff but dressed up in a way. And the thing that struck me about that was it was a completely different thing to anything that business had done before. So it really stood out. As I say, it could have been a bad career move, and I might only have lasted 8 weeks and had to disappear with my bunting in a bin bag down the road. But fortunately, that didn't happen. And then the thing was, we were actually living the values before we'd even defined them.
Yeah.
So we were kind of showing what was special, even though we hadn't got it in a kind of catchy 5 or 6 bullet point thing. So that really worked. And then I think the thing for me that stuck with that was that anything but ordinary. How do you do something and give it a slightly different twist? Because that will make it stand out from the crowd. Sorry, that
Yeah.
was a bit of a long example.
So that kind of fun and fresh and different,
Yeah, it was.
where you've got that. It's
And
something that
and
people haven't seen before.
and also we were launching the values before we'd even articulated them, because we were saying this is a moment in time where things are going to be different. And yes, we've got a band in the canteen at lunchtime. It was a very standout moment. Now that wouldn't necessarily work in every business, but it was right for us at the time, and those values lasted and were genuinely part of how the business operated.
I love it. Um, I'm just, thinking there as well, the people who were there at that time, I imagine it's one of those things they will always remember.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely, definitely created a storm. Some people
So
like
when you talk about, we often talk about HR like
the
capturing hearts and minds, is like people remember that kind of stuff.
yeah, and some people didn't like it, right? There was definitely a bit of that, but fortunately, more people did and bought into it than didn't. You know, some people thought it was a bit of a distraction from actually doing work, um, and that's a cultural indicator and something about how the culture shifted over the 6 years I was there.
That's a really interesting point as well. And I know from having worked in HR teams in organizations is the idea sometimes that some people won't like it sometimes stops us doing those different things.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it, it's nice to hear that you kind of you do it anyway, and it's okay if more people like it than, but some people don't, because newsflash, not everyone likes everything the same.
You can't do that. What's that old fable where oh god, basically, you can't. You have to take feedback and you have to take it in the round, but the reality of life is you have to aggregate it, right? And I
Yeah,
guess this is going back to that. You can't have 2,000 performance systems to match everybody's personal requirements because you just don't do it. And this is isn't this an old oh god, I'm going to embarrass myself now. Like an Old Testament tale where the guy ends up carrying the donkey because he's got feedback um, that from all these different people, and he's trying to react to it. God, that's going to bug me. Sorry.
I'm
Um,
sure it is something.
yeah. No, apologies. Long time since I was at Sunday school, but but um, but yeah, you can't please all the people all the time. That just doesn't work. And if you try and do that, you end up, as you say, kind of maybe pulling things down to become something that is almost meaningless. So when you've got a journey like that and you're trying to create a great culture or change a culture or evolve it, then there will always be people who liked it the way it was and hanker after the old times. Um, but you either need to work with them and help them see it and show them, and maybe they'll learn to like it, which is the ideal outcome, or not. Back as we were saying a bit earlier, but yeah, we did have a lot of fun, and that was a period of good work joy.
Great. And I know that a lot of people in the zone of trying to make sure that values, etc., are properly embedded in organizations so that people get it and work with them and work to them. So obviously you had this like big bang, fun, fresh, cool way of starting that journey, um, which is always great. The big bang of this is exciting, isn't it? I'm interested in what did you do afterwards when you kind of had those values defined and you were there and you go past and you're actually making it happen in organizations. What are some of the things that you've done or seen work that help make those things real for people?
um, I think the starting point is whatever you come up with has to feel real and authentic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've seen kind of values exercises done where they've been exercises done away from the business or in a boardroom or
Mm.
cascaded without involvement. So that festival was a high point of involvement, but that was just the start. What we then did was kind of gather all the data and then had a period of time where I was essentially trying to distill all of this data and information and words that we had into something that made sense and landed. And people who were in the business could look at it and go, you know what? He's done it. That feels right.
Yeah.
Because that's how you get the real buy in. If it doesn't, then you haven't got the values. You've articulated something completely different. And
Yeah.
an interesting example. So, our values at the time, after that festival, um, all started with the words "we love." So we love being different. We love having fun. We love doing stuff together. We love getting stuff done, and we love straight talking. And the amount of debate we had about "we love" Was really, really interesting, because for me, we love showed the power and the passion and the commitment. You could have had those values without we love. We are different. We get stuff done. We do stuff together. We talk straight, something like that. But it's not the same passion. But that was a real debate that went backwards and forwards for a good couple of weeks to make sure that people were comfortable with it, happy, and that we kind of agreed it. But it's involving people to get their feedback, and then they automatically feel bought into it.
Yeah.
And I've seen values launched where they've just been launched, and people have basically looked at each other and gone, "What's that?" It's just a list that
Yeah.
HR has created, right? It's a list of good
Yeah.
words that somebody somewhere has come up with, but it doesn't reflect what happens around here. And surprise, surprise, they don't then land. But it was interesting because
Yeah.
we did have to, as part of the integration with Booking.com, we then had to wave goodbye to our values, because obviously we're part of a bigger business. But again, we did a separate job of kind of like reassessing the values that were there and restating them. And actually, it worked pretty well. But people were involved again, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's, for me, just one of the real basic things that everybody who works in the world of, if anything to do with people, whether you are in HR or whether you're a manager, what is that involve people from the beginning.
Yeah,
Don't think that you can create something and deliver it and everyone will just be like, oh yeah, super engaged,
and
because you've just told them to do it.
and
Because although you said at the beginning, command and control structures aren't the norm anymore, and I'm pleased to say that I think in most organizations they're not fully there. When you do things like in a leadership team room or in a boardroom or away from the business without the involvement and create something that you then want people to do, that's kind of command and control, but in a subtler form.
yeah, and I think, don't get me wrong, businesses need to make decisions,
Mm.
and it's not it's not some sort of flawless democracy that every decision has to get every single person in the business involved in. It just that
No,
things wouldn't happen.
well, business wouldn't happen,
It
would it?
wouldn't happen. So at some point you need to make decisions, and the leadership team and managers need to. But I think there is stuff around being close to the business and really understanding it and understanding what colleagues and customers really want. And I think in HR generally, and I've seen this as well, we go, right, we need a new performance management system. We'll go off and invent something that's beautifully theoretically wonderful, probably quite complicated, but theoretically fully backed up and all that sort of stuff, and not think about what's going to happen to the colleague who sat once or twice a year with their manager having that performance review discussion. How does it pan out? And that means that you then invent stuff or create stuff that's over engineered, and then doesn't get used, or if it gets used reluctantly, and so people aren't really
I
bought
have to
into
do
it.
this.
Yeah, yeah. Here's another thing. Here's another form that I've got to fill out. So I think it's interesting. I think I'm not advocating uh, some sort of fantasy land democracy thing at all, but I am saying we should listen to our people and have a real understanding of where most of that kind of thought is and what do they need, not what do we think they need.
Yeah. Not what does the HBR say we need this month, but
Yeah,
what do our
yeah, yeah.
people who are
No,
right here, right
yeah.
now actually need?
Don't get me wrong. I do think that taking stuff. I mean, I completely agree with the service profit chain. Yeah, but I would just rephrase it in a different
Mm.
way. Um,
Yeah.
for my particular environment, there would be other environments that would probably want more of that academic, data-driven. Where's the facts? Let me prod this. So it might be perfectly acceptable for that, but it's about knowing your audience, and that applies for customers and colleagues in the same way.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I can't remember what it was, but it must have been a few years ago. I was reading and really interested in the idea that HR teams would benefit from thinking more like marketing teams, and to think about understanding your audience, who is there, what are their needs right now, what are they interested in, and then thinking about, if that is the case, how do we use some of those techniques that marketing people use to be able to really engage people in the stuff that you're trying to do. So if it is a performance framework, or if it is values, how do you market that in the right way internally?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think from an HR perspective, we've got to have the right products, and then we can't just and I've definitely seen this as well in busy organisations. There's like a project to complete, and we get the thing done. The project is complete. We launch, and then we move on to the next project. But actually, the key part of that project is launching, communicating, embedding, making sure it's settled, going back, test and learn, adapt, evolve
Yeah.
before you move on to the next thing. But we're all busy and we all want to achieve a lot of things, and prioritization is always a challenge for probably most businesses, I'd have thought.
Yeah. And I don't know about you as well, but for me, and this is where I get stuck on stuff, is the shiny new thing, the new project, getting started on something is a lot of where I get some work joy from. And I'm not sure I get that much work joy from seeing something embedded into business as usual. Um, and that's, you've got to have people who can do both ends of that spectrum, right? You can't just have people who want to start the new and shiny, exciting thing, but never think about how does this really work on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, completely. You've got to do both.
And that's why I do the job that I do now, and in different ways of thinking about. But that's also about like your work joy. It's like understanding where you get your work joy from, the stuff you're going to find harder because it's not what it's there, and then working and understanding yourself, it then helps you to think about, so where does this take me in my career? If that's the stuff I like doing, then for me, going into an operational business as usual day-to-day role is not going to be the right place for me to be.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And for me, I've been doing a lot of that over the last few weeks as I think about where does my career go next, and what is it that I like, and what sort of organisations do I um, want to be working for and working with. So you're right. There's a huge amount of self awareness needed, I think, if we're going to get it right and make sure that we don't, as individuals, end up in organisations that are set up to not make us happy. We've all got a fix
Yeah.
somewhere, I think.
And not, it's not like they're deliberately not making you happy, it's just a not a right
No, it's
fit.
just not. Yeah, exactly. They're not doing it. They'll be making loads and loads of people really happy, but you've got to get that mix, and we all
Yeah.
have different needs. So it's finding that match.
Yeah. And that, I think that match is really important. It comes back to our earlier conversation, is that if a person like me, if I went and ended up in a role which I thought was going to be great for me, but I'm sat there and I'm doing the same thing day in and day out, nothing's new, everything's kind of and which some people love, and they love getting into the detail of all of it, which is just not who I am as a person, or where my strengths lie. I might become that mood hoover. I might be the mood hoover in the room because I'm a square peg in a round hole situation,
Yeah, yeah.
versus really understanding that self-awareness of who I am makes.
I've had an example recently. I was involved in a process for a particular role, and it was a great business. And I met the CEO and the ops director. Both wonderful people. But at the end of it, we finished, and then the headhunter sort of phoned me up in that kind of, how did it go? And I said, do you watch First Dates? Um, the TV program First Dates.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and For anybody that doesn't watch it, it's basically filming people on their first date, and then they get together at the end, and it's like, do you want to see each other again? And a lot of time in that first date, they have a really nice meal, but the chemistry is just not there. I said the interview was a bit like that. I had a very nice time, but no sparkle.
no second date.
No second date, and I think that's fine, right? That's cool.
Yeah,
That's
of
cool.
course it is.
It's got to work for both sides. So it is an incredibly good business, and on the face of it, it was good, but there was just no chemistry. There has to be chemistry.
And I think sometimes if you look at just what happens on paper, say you kind of do the paper thing, is this the right kind of job? Has it got the right kind of job title? Is it the right kind of salary? Is it the type of organization I can see myself working for? And it ticks all those boxes. Sometimes we fight against that intuition or that chemistry and say, oh no, but look, it's got all of these things. But actually that chemistry fact is so important. Do
Yeah,
you want to spend your day with some people that you have no chemistry with?
yeah.
Probably not. It's like so much of your life is working and working with people.
Absolutely.
I definitely would take the chemistry quite high on my list.
Yeah. So
Amazing. But then other people might be like, no, it's all about the facts and what I work on, and that's the wonderfulness of humans and how
that's
everything
fine, because in that
is
case
unique to us all.
there is chemistry for them, right? That we're all different, so
Yeah,
it all works. And I am by nature a kind of feeling instinct sort of person, so it's got to feel right.
yeah. And being taking those brave decisions that say, actually, if it doesn't feel right, it's not for me.
Yeah,
Love that. So I am going to move us on to, if it's okay with you, I've got some quick fire questions for you that I just love to find out a bit more of what you would say to these questions. So are you ready?
I'm ready. Hit me.
Excellent. So I want to know for you personally, in your world, in your life, what is something that's always guaranteed to bring you a little bit of work joy?
I love working with great people and being part of a great team, and it's that energy that I get. So when I recently, when you leave a business, people say some very nice stuff, and and having a great team and feeling part of something special is really important to me, because that's how I get my energy. So
Yeah,
yeah,
great. Love that. So being around the people that give you energy, that you get to
and
work
you're
in the
doing
team.
stuff
Like, yeah,
together.
great thing there for
Yeah,
work joy.
that team
Yeah,
thing is really important for me anyway.
love it. What book are you currently reading?
Right, so this I've finished this one, right? So but recently, and this is a bit odd. You may not expect this one, but have you seen the book, which is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, the Horse?
Oh,
By
yeah, I love it.
I mean, it only takes about 20 minutes to read, right? But it was I saw a clip it from it. I saw a post on Facebook or something like that, and just we got the book, The Joy of Amazon, next day, and it's just
Yeah,
full of little wise moments. And I love it, and it's presented in a the illustration is really nice, but actually it's about the messages and the lessons. It's a bit like the Winnie the Pooh and Piglet type stuff
yeah.
that you see published, but I think there's some lessons in there, but I haven't got it with me, so don't ask me to quote any, otherwise.
Yeah, I've got it and I've seen it, and I actually bought it for a couple of friends because I think it's really lovely. And I'm just thinking, if I can remember, one of the quotes from one of them is, it's like the boy asking the horse or something, what's the bravest thing someone can say, and it's like help or something like that.
Yeah,
And all of them are just these lovely little moments that if you just think about them, you go, God, that's really, really insightful
they're,
and
they're,
really simple and
they're,
really lovely.
they're the sorts of things that I wish I would say to my grandchildren when I have them. They're kind of like just those like really wise moments. So yeah, that,
They're ready for when you want to be a wise
I'll,
old man.
I'll just stack them up, hide the book, and just reel them out every now and again.
And pretend it's you and
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
Got these wonderful wise things. I love it. It's a great read, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone else as well. Right, question 3. What's the best or most useful piece of advice that someone has given you in your life that you find yourself always coming back to?
So this is we almost touched on this earlier. I thought you were going to say it, um, but and I can't remember who introduced me to this first. It's not unique by any stretch of the imagination, but I can't remember. It might have been a good friend of mine called Chester Elton, who's um, who's an author and speaks on cultural stuff. He's a great guy. Check him out. But anyway, the advice was basically, don't, there's that saying, treat people as you wish to be treated.
Yeah.
Which, in retail, I started my career in retail, and that was kind of one of the things that was trotted out quite a lot in customer service training and stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, the advice that really stuck with me is don't treat people as you wish to be treated, but treat them how they wish to be treated.
Yeah.
And I know it's not sort of like, I know people will have heard that in other places, but it really sticks with me because how, and we've discussed this a lot during this last half hour or so. It's not how I feel and how I want to be treated doesn't translate to everybody. So let's try and find out and get it right for people.
Yeah. And that's the thing, you have to find out. If you always do it how you want to be treated, you're not actually really understanding the other person's perspective and what they're looking for. So find out and then work with them on what they need. And as we said, not in this like utopian idea that we can get everything completely right all the time, because that's not how the real world works. But where we can do, let's make that happen for people.
Yeah.
It's really good advice. Thank you
Yeah.
for that one. And then final question from me. What is something super practical, bit of advice for our listeners from you, that's something that they could go and do easily today, tomorrow, the next day, maybe builds a bit of a habit that you think would help them either for themselves or for their workplaces bring a little bit of work joy?
Yeah, and again, I mean, honestly, I had we discussed this. I had written these down before we spoke, but the conversation seems to have led all the way to this. It's a bit bizarre, but I mean, I think my thing is keep it simple and think about the end user.
Yeah.
We in HR we do have a tendency in some areas to kind of over engineer and overcomplicate, and actually the best solutions are often the simplest. And if we're talking about getting buy-in, if some, I mean, why is Amazon so successful? It's because it's simple.
Yeah, easy to use.
So just keep, I mean, I'm sure there's a huge amount of complexity behind me pressing a button and a book turning up 24 hours later. But it's the end user experience. It's simple. So that would be my thing, I think.
Yeah, I'm always really big on the simplest things are always or often the best way of doing it. But to get something to be simple takes a lot of work. Actually, over engineering something sometimes is easier than creating simplicity, which sounds counterintuitive. But I honestly find that sometimes to create the simple, you have to go through kind of the hard yards.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a really lovely conversation, and I think lots of people are going to find it useful thinking about values and people and how you get things done. Where can people, if they want to, find out a bit more about you or get in touch with you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. Or my email is ryan.cheynehr@gmail.com.
Fab. And we will put your LinkedIn profile onto the show notes so that people can click straight through and hopefully connect with you and enjoy some more of your thinking and see what you're getting up to. Thank you so much for joining me today on the WorkJoy Jam. I've really enjoyed myself, so thanks for giving me some work joy.
Thank you, Beth. It's been great. I've enjoyed it myself.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the WorkJoy Jam with my friend Ryan Cheyne. And so interesting, so many great things to take here and lots of bits of advice. I was scribbling, lots and lots of notes. And I think if we're looking at things from the HR perspective, which is where my head headed at the end of our conversation, is around asking these two great questions, which is, what does WorkJoy mean in your context? So that's in your organisation, with the people that you have, with what you do, with your customers, how you service them. Maybe that's a good question to go and ask. What does it really look like here? And also to consider, working here, what is it that motivates, that inspires, that gets people really excited about doing their job? And if you can discover that, you can usually find the things that you can do to make a big difference. So then what are the products? What are the services? How do you provide them in the best possible way? I loved Ryan's story about how they created values, and this hashtag anything but ordinary really gets me excited, and that sounds like a place that I would love to get involved with. But doing it through the involvement of other people, making them really real, making them really authentic. And authentic is a really overused word, but just think about that. If it doesn't feel like the values are actually lived, if it doesn't feel like those things are true, then that's not really going to land very well with people. They won't be inspiring, and it won't get people motivated. So I love that idea. And then finally, the one that really stuck with me, and one that I think in the world of HR we could probably all learn a little bit more from and remember, is to always keep things super, super simple. I think that simplicity, sometimes we overcomplicate things because it's our area of expertise and there's like 10 steps when there could be 3, or there's lots and lots of paperwork, or there's lots of different things you can do. And actually people just really appreciate access to stuff, to products, to services in the simplest way possible, because everybody is so busy. Let's make it easy and simple for people. So huge thank you to Ryan for being a guest on the WorkJoy Jam podcast. If you'd like to find out more about Create WorkJoy, do head to our website, www.createworkjoy.com, where you can find out more about what we're up to. You can find out more about the WorkJoy Way coaching program, which is my 16-week signature program, helping people to create and cultivate more joy in their working life. And also about the upcoming and growing community of Club WorkJoy, which will be launching later on this year. So thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Do go and have a listen to some of our others. Thank you.